Earth before humans was a world of dynamic change and teeming life. Here is a glimpse into the planet's history before our arrival. A violent birth, Earth formed roughly 4.5 billion years ago from a swirling cloud of dust and gas. It was a chaotic time of intense heat and bombardment by asteroids. The rise of life, despite the harsh conditions, life emerged. The earliest life forms were simple, single-celled organisms. Over millions of years, life evolved into a diverse array of creatures, from giant dinosaurs to the intricate ecosystems we see today. Shifting continents. Continents were not always fixed in their current positions. They have drifted and collided over geologic time, creating mountains, oceans, and shaping the planet's climate. Ice ages and warm periods. Earth's climate has fluctuated dramatically throughout its history. There have been periods of intense cold, which are known as ice ages, when much of the planet was covered in ice, and periods of warmth. Volcanic activity. Volcanoes have played a crucial role in shaping the planet's surface. They release gases that contribute to the atmosphere and create new landforms. Key points. Humans are newcomers. Our species has only existed for a tiny fraction of Earth's history. Life is resilient. Life has persisted through countless challenges, demonstrating its remarkable ability to adapt and survive. The planet is constantly changing. Earth is a dynamic system in constant flux, shaped by forces both internal and external. Disclaimer: this is a simplified overview. The Earth's history is incredibly complex, and there is much we still do not understand. Certainly, here is a breakdown of some of the major geological periods and key events that occurred during them. 1. Precambrian Eon, 4.6 billion to 541 million years ago. Hadean Eon, from 4.6 to 4 billion years ago. Earth's formation, intense bombardment by asteroids, and the initial cooling of the planet. Archean Eon, 4 to 2.5 billion years ago. Emergence of the first life, likely single-celled organisms, formation of the earliest continents. Proterozoic Eon, 2.5 billion to 541 million years ago. Rise of oxygen in the atmosphere, the Great Oxidation Event, evolution of more complex life forms like early multicellular organisms. 2. Paleozoic Era, 541 to 252 million years ago. Cambrian Period, 541 to 485 million years ago. Cambrian Explosion, a rapid diversification of life, including the appearance of many animal groups. Ordovician Period, 485 to 443 million years ago. Colonization of the oceans by diverse marine life. Silurian Period, 443 to 419 million years ago. First land plants appear. Devonian Period, 419 to 359 million years ago. Age of Fishes, a significant increase in fish diversity, including the evolution of tetrapods, four-limbed vertebrates. Carboniferous Period, 359 to 299 million years ago, formation of vast coal deposits from lush swamp forests. Permian Period, from 299 to 252 million years ago. The largest mass extinction event in Earth's history, wiping out a significant portion of marine and terrestrial life. 3. Mesozoic Era, 252 to 66 million years ago. Triassic Period, 252 to 201 million years ago. Rise of dinosaurs and the first mammals. Jurassic Period, 201 to 145 million years ago. Age of giant dinosaurs like Brachiosaurus and Stegosaurus.
After 40 million long years of ice formation, the ice finally began to disappear as carbon dioxide returned to the atmosphere, and the melting ice caused sea levels to rise, and the climate eventually stabilized, allowing life to flourish again. With the disappearance of creatures like the Camaraceres, relatives of the sea, they are now able to ascend to the rank of the highest predator or the expra, and flourish more than ever before and diversify and become more terrifying. One of their types, the somacarp, was unusually large. It could reach more than 2 meters. The fish also continued to adapt. The first appearance of fish with a moving jaw was in the Silurian period, Catfish and the first coral reefs also appeared and formed important parts of the new diverse ecosystem in which the trilobites and other creatures lived. At the same time, plant life on Earth, which may have previously eliminated most of the other life on the planet, was increasing in number, and plants on Earth began to appear. Takes more forms, complexity, and clarity, and evolved into organisms with vascular stems, which is known as vascular endophytes. And this allows them to absorb and retain water effectively. These plants form the basis for all modern plants that we know today. With them came the next wave of saturation of the Earth's atmosphere with oxygen, which is oxygenation. This time, instead of entering the world in the Delady era, had the exact opposite. The extra oxygen was enough to support animal life on Earth, and arthropod insects began to emerge from the oceans. The first groups to emerge were the myriapods, such as saint beds, mill beds, and treasure beds, or spiders and scorpions. These terrifying crawling insects may have been at the beginning. The water is fixed to avoid other predators or to reach new food sources. But the idea of being in a completely new environment that they can take, of course, is a very tempting idea. Marine life was very competitive in the ocean. The land, however, was a new, empty playground, full of opportunities, of course, the creatures. They still had gills, even after they moved to land, and they had to maintain their rank in order to be able to survive, so they didn't go too far from the water's edge, at least in the beginning. The Silurian period ended roughly 419 million years ago, with some relatively minor extinction events, most likely caused by climate changes. And we say relatively secondary, because on the contrary, the others did not bring life to Earth, wrote it, and left the planet completely dead. Yes, they were not enjoyable, of course. However, regardless, the Devonian era that followed, the Devonian period, was the most influential era on life after the Cambrian era. In the beginning, the oldest fish, the well-known shark, appeared, although they were far from being the predators or ibex predators that we know today. At that time, the ibex predators were controlling a group of bony fish called placods, or this monster, specifically Dunkleosteus, which was the top predator of the day, at the very least. Why could it have been a little shorter than a male great white shark? It was 3 times the size of an adult human, but at its largest it was equivalent to about 8 meters in length, which was considered the largest living species at that time. One of the most terrifying fish that ever lived. In its head, the giant had teeth that were like guillotines, and experts believe that its bite may have been much stronger than the bite of the saltwater crocodile, which is considered one of the strongest bites of animals currently on our planet. Theories indicate that it may have been more than double that. God knows best. Fish were not the only things that grew large on land. Plants also began to grow as a result of all the previous development. The first woody trees grew with complex roots, branches, and height, and they formed the original forest that produced a huge amount of oxygen for the atmosphere, and at the same time absorbed huge amounts of carbon dioxide. All this means that the terrestrial environment became more attractive to new life, and finally vertebrates began to notice some types of fish, such as what is known as longfish, which are head, meaning they spent more and more time in shallow water, and some of them came out to land or the ground for short periods. But in the Devonian period, many changes occurred. If we will talk, for example, about one of the oldest known vertebrates, which is called the Tiktaali, and this was the one that was able to breathe outside the water. This strange creature had the characteristics of fish, amphibians, and reptiles. They felt that it was something in between land and sea, and it mostly lived under the water. It was able to come up. On Earth, when we needed after that, the aquatic organisms spent most of their time in the water, and at the same time, the arthropods that lived on the planet or on Earth began to diversify. Insects with wings and spiders evolved and spread, and as for the creatures that were still confined to the sea, things were about to be. It gets worse as the Devonian period approaches. The fauna from the end of the levels of the oceans began to decline sharply, and there is no oxygen in it to be able to maintain its life. The numbers of a group of marine creatures died. Tritus and sea scorpions, which had lasted for a long time, unfortunately became involved, although some of them survived. Their numbers would never recover. The dominant species, such as the cis, for example, from another aspect, unfortunately became completely extinct, and up to 70% of all non-fairy species died. Scientists here are not entirely sure what caused the sudden drop in oxygen, but scientists believe that it is most likely related to trees. Trees in this era reached a height of approximately 40 meters, so they needed deep root systems. They supported it, but the roots were not only anchoring the plants and absorbing nutrients, but they were also affecting the land around them, changing the rocks and creating nutrient-rich soil. The problem was that this soil was still covering the planet so thinly that a lot of it was being washed into the rivers and oceans, taking all the nutrients with them, and it helps a series of giant algae grow in the water. And all of these new algae are photosynthesizing, and they were removing oxygen from the water, which is not a good thing for anything living there. Who could have imagined that plants could be responsible for all of these deaths or for this extinction event? And while the oceans were underwater destroyed, however, the creatures that existed on Earth continued to be astonished. And Shireen had happened, a shift in the balance of power. The era that came after that, the Carboniferous era, showed the extreme dominance that life on land had formed, starting 359 million years ago. The Carboniferous era saw plant life on land flourish. More and more they multiplied and formed vast forests covering most of the planet. This terrible amount of plants caused the oxygen in the atmosphere to reach levels it had never reached before or since, and it had crazy effects on the animals at that time. For example, the arthropod insects that invaded the land for the first time in the era. Silurian now. They had a very long time to evolve and adapt, and they were everywhere. And when the oxygen in the air increased, a new change happened to them. Arthropods take in oxygen through small openings in their bodies, and with more oxygen available and huge amounts of food available in the form of these new plants they grew. Very large, for example, Arthropleura millipede, or a worm the size of a car, and it may have reached a terrifying length. We are talking about 2 meters or more. Fortunately for the small creatures at that time, these worms were always herbivorous, and as for insects or other creatures, not all of them were small. The idea is that even among the insects that had wings, there was a creature known as megamirae,